You see, the report we are getting is that the federal government has sent the proposed budget for 2025 to the National Assembly for approval.
Really?
And we are having a budget of 47.9 trillion naira for 2025. And the federal government says they are going to be borrowing 13.8 trillion naira to fund the deficit in the budget.
Yes.
Now, what is budget deficit? Budget deficit is simply when the amount the government plans to spend is greater than the amount they plan to raise from revenue. So they will have to borrow more money in order to bridge this gap.
That is not corrupt.
You know, when we went to school, our teachers taught us to cut our coat according to our size and be according to our cloth. But Nigerian politicians, we are not in class when they taught this lesson. But the borrowing is not the issue, because even US is the most indebted country in the world. But here are my major concerns from this proposed budget. Number one, the federal government is pushing for approval of 2025 budget without any report on the implementation, the success, and the failure of the 2024 budget.
Photo.
In fact, some of us have even forgotten that we had a budget for 2024. But we are all in this country when a budget of 27.5 trillion was passed for 2024. $7.6 billion and 100 million euros was borrowed to fund the deficit in that budget, which is equivalent to 9 trillion naira, be 10 trillion as at the time. And they said it was going to be a budget of renewed hope.
Photo.
And now, towards the end of 2024, the only thing Nigerians have seen is renewed shege.
Yes!
And nobody is talking about this debt we incurred and the project it financed. We are just moving on to the next one.
There's nothing to
You know, the same way they removed history from our curriculum, that is the same way the country is being structured to make everybody face front sheepishly.
Hey!
Nobody is supposed to look back and ask, how did we get here and where are we going? If the driver that is driving us has missed his way, why not park this car? Let everybody come down.
Nigeria is not for you.
But no, we all move forward. And we forget that when you are moving on the wrong direction, speed is not an advantage. You live life forward, but you understand life backward.
You must learn a lesson.
Now, for instance, amongst the 27.5 trillion budget for last year, 2.7 trillion was budgeted for security.
You get it?
So I was expecting the National Security Advisor to come out towards the end of this year now and tell us, okay, look at how the 2.7 trillion was implemented. Look at how much was used for salary, machinery, arms and ammunition, survey and intelligence gathering. And this is the impact of the 2.7 trillion, how Nigerians are now more secure in 2024 than they were in 2023. And the same National Security Advisor that I was expecting to come and give us a report is now coming out to lead the national prayer with the First Lady in order to solve Nigeria's security challenges. And whenever I think about it,
When I want to explain it, my head will be headache me.
because if we are a country where we take accountability seriously, I don't think we would have spent $2 billion maintaining national refineries that are not working, and nobody is being held responsible. So because of this, we have created a national culture where we proposed a humongous budget that we don't even have the money to fund. Then we go and borrow money from abroad. Then we pad this budget, allocate money to non-existent and irrelevant projects, making it easy for this money to be stolen. And when this money is stolen, the people that steal the money will now take the money back to the same country where we borrowed the money from and go and hide it there in offshore accounts. Now these people will use the same money they lent to us, which we have now brought back to them, to invest in their own economy, while we are now servicing the debt and paying interest. And we will be making provisions for debt servicing in the subsequent budget that we are going to make. And the next year, when we want to make a new budget, we'll still go back to this country to ask for another loan. They will not give us back our money, the one we went to go and deposit in their country.
I got the advice from
And in economics, this is what you call law of diminishing return. In chemistry, this is what you call a chain reaction. In life, this is what you call whatever goes around comes around. In spirituality, this is what you call familiar spirits.
We can create wonders.
In Nigeria, the only two questions we are not allowed to ask is what happens to government money and what happens to church money. You see these two questions, you are not allowed to ask it.
You don't know.
Now, my other major concern from this proposed budget is if you remove the 13.8 trillion which the government wants to borrow, we will still have additional 34 trillion which we are supposed to raise in revenue. How do we intend to raise this revenue? It is from projections that are not even certain. Because the government says they are going to produce 2.06 million barrels of crude oil per day.
Okay.
And the average cost of the crude oil is going to be $75 per barrel. So that is where they are making their projections on. But National Bureau of Statistics is telling us that we are producing 1.4 million barrels a day.
You get it?
How do we intend to move from 1.4 million barrels to 2.06 million barrels by next year? I can assure you that even the government that is making the projection does not know how it wants to achieve it. Maybe what God cannot do does not exist. You know, Pentecostal Fellowship of Nigeria is planning a 40-day prayer and fasting starting from January next year. So maybe that is what we are going to address, during the program. But what will now happen is if the government fails to raise this revenue they are talking about, they will now send a supplementary loan request to the National Assembly to borrow more money. So before the second quarter of 2025, federal government will send a loan request to the National Assembly. I'm not a prophet, but I can predict the future by looking at the reality on ground. Or secondly, they will go to CBN and make him to turn the CBN governor and make him turn Central Bank of Nigeria into a printing press, where they will print excess cash as a form of domestic debt. They will now look for one English and call it, they may call it ways and means, ups and downs, rise and fall. They will just call it anything. And you know what happens when you print excess cash without balancing it with foreign earning? It will further scatter the value of the valueless currency that you already have.
You dey use your function.
So if I am to define this budget based on what I'm seeing, I will call it budget of renewed inflation. Hey! Now, I don't want to be a bearer of bad news by telling you that things are going to get worse. But from all indication, it doesn't look like things are going to get better anytime soon.
Yeah, maybe.
So tighten your seat belt because on a GL in the country we.
Hey, Jesus.
Ulang dia,